everyone is doing all right this morning, or everyone has had a good morning. The gentleman behind me, and this video is not going to be long. And before I start, this video will be demonetized just like the other one. So if you guys enjoy the content, please consider supporting this. If you find yourself coming back to this channel often, please consider supporting through PayPal or Patreon. However you support, if you do so, you can get access to special content. We do Patreon appreciation episodes each week. In fact, we're going to probably have another one during the week just to make up for the last one. But nevertheless, we have those for the patrons. Not to mention, you will be supporting content that you love and enjoy. So I'll leave that there. And let's do the news. For 3 years, we've been inundated with Trump and Russia. A conspiracy theory, for all intents and purposes. A Tom Clancy conspiracy theory. Now, various sectors of the public or various sectors of our political social space was incentivized to push this theory. I mean, all of the books that were written, all of the breathless hours speculating, coming up with stuff that many courses ended up being untrue, but always in the very specific direction of showing that Donald Trump colluded in some sort of way with the Russian government. It was a foregone conclusion. How on earth did this conspiracy theory get propagated into the American society, into the intelligence services themselves? Because they were looking at this stuff as it was real stuff. In some respect, John McCain ported this information over. In some respect, you had Democrats paying for the information. Like, there's so many odd tidbits that came along with this, but ultimately the information was utter nonsense. And there were people who knew the information was nonsense, knew that that information was a political hit job, knew that it was paid for by political operatives to go after Donald Trump. This is not because I like Donald Trump at all. I want Donald Trump beaten at the ballot box. This is more so just kind of an odd hysteria that has taken over and that took over this country for the last 3 years. And mind you, it turned out to be not true. That's the important point. They were saying that the president of the United States was being controlled by a foreign entity. It turned out to be not true. Hysterical, hair on fire reports that the president of the United States was somehow being controlled by a foreign government. And yet, that's what has been going on for 3 years. The media, despite being wrong on this, pat themselves on the back as if they did something perfectly okay. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There's no come to Jesus on the failings that were associated with propagating that narrative to the public. And same way here. It's like there's no come to Jesus moment where the media says, you know what, we just got this wrong. None. So Bob Woodward, if you don't know who he is, he's pretty much every Pulitzer Prize winner that you can, or every literary award that you can think of. But he's more instrumental in Watergate, his writings on Watergate. He comes out to talk about this. And listen to what he says, because his opinion on this is the same as mine. I was one of those people that said this was nonsense, or that I believe this kind of conspiracy between the two were nonsense. And yet I was engulfed in 3 years of my life talking about this subject. I believe this was a political hit job. I believe that there were elements of the Democratic Party working with intelligence members who didn't necessarily like this idea of Donald Trump taking office, and they conspired to take down the president using this very specific narrative. That's somewhat of a cynical view of it, but I don't necessarily think that view is all that wrong. And either way, if Donald Trump needed to be investigated, this should also be. Like, what amounted to a conspiracy theory with this idea of Donald Trump and Russia was investigated thoroughly by a special prosecutor that went through each and everything that he could in very skeptical detail, looking for anything that he could charge people on. And he charged plenty of people in pursuit of this. I don't understand why a special prosecutor looking into the origins of something that has engulfed the public for 3 years that turned out to be a complete conspiracy theory also doesn't warrant a certain degree of scrutiny to ensure that this wasn't, like that there wasn't any malfeasance on this front in political ends, meaning that everybody was working in good faith. That should be checked. The veracity of that needs to be checked, because otherwise this was a severe jump of the shark within regards to trying to take down the president. If Mueller would have came back with anything that gave any even the slightest thought that there was collusion, Donald Trump would have been taken out of that office. I want you to understand what we're talking about here. This is not some, run-of-the-mill investigation. They were trying to take off his head. It should be checked whether that was done in good faith or whether that was done for political ends. And if it was done for political ends, those people need to be punished. That's my point. I think Woodward agrees with me on this.
Yes. More than 2 years ago, back in January of 2017, when the Steele dossier first surfaced, I remember you're saying right here on this show that it is a, quote, garbage document. Do you feel that the Mueller report basically discredited it, and to what degree do you think it played a role in the Russia investigation?
Well, that's what's going to be investigated by lots of people, including the Attorney General and including Senator Lindsey Graham.
And the Inspector General is also doing it.
Yes, and it should be. I mean, what I found out recently, which was really quite surprising, the dossier, which really is got a lot of garbage in it, and Mueller found that to be the case. Early in building the intelligence community assessment on Russian interference, in an early draft, they actually put the dossier on page 2 in kind of a breakout box. I think it was the CIA pushing this. Real intelligence experts looked at this and said, no, this is not intelligence, this is garbage, and they took it out. But in this process, the idea that they would include something like that in one of the great stellar intelligence assessments, as Mueller also found out, is highly questionable. Needs to be investigated.
I just want to pick up. We want to ask you for questions for the panel. And on this issue of the Mueller report and the genesis of it, we got this on Twitter from Leo Terry. How quickly do you think Bill Barr will start going after those who weaponize the Department of Justice and FBI against Trump and his campaign? Jillian, how do you answer Leo? And to what degree do you think the whole Russia investigation?
I'm a lefty. I don't like Donald Trump at all. And I am listening to what they're saying, and I'm saying, yes, they're right. They're right. Here's the catch. If Bill Barr comes out and says, we're going to look into how this got started, meaning, how did you get a FISA memo or a FISA warrant based on the dossier, or even using the dossier for any pretext of something like that when it's somewhat of a political document? What was the reasoning that you used in order to go after Donald Trump? When this started to be used for a political hit job, how did this get into the American public? This political document get dropped into the American public as if it was coming from the intelligence services? How did all of this stuff take place? We've been involved in a 3-year conspiracy theory. You don't think it should be investigated as to why this massive psyop that was put on the American public? Why is that not more curious? You're going to have 33% of the population, let's say the Democratic part of the population, that is still digging that ditch. And anything that you say on that front of Barr, saying, look, we're going to investigate this, they will say, oh my God, it's a cover-up. It's a cover-up. He's trying to protect the president. Or, in ironic fashion, somebody will come to the mic and say, it is a witch hunt to look into how this massive psyop got brought onto the American public for the last 3 years. And God, this is one of those cases where I hope Republicans actually stand strong on this and say, no, it's not a witch hunt. We're looking into this case. And for every Democrat, I give you fair warning. If you're using this, thinking that you're going to use this to go into the political campaign in 2020, good luck. Good luck. Half of the public thinks this is a witch hunt. Just so we're clear. And if you're going to use this at all, say Donald Trump and Russia in any level, especially if you're using this notion of impeachment, what needs to be investigated is how did a massive psyop get put over the American public where they believe that the President of the United States was being used by foreign power? How? How did what started off as purely politics, meaning Hillary Clinton getting out of office, screaming, howling at the moon that Donald Trump somehow colluded with the Russians to help her lose. How did what started off as a political operation get perpetrated into the intelligence services and given legitimacy as it got filtered through the media? How? These are amazing questions. If it is true indeed that there was enough evidence to go after Donald Trump for colluding with Russia, then there's hell of a lot, just as much evidence to look into the case of how did all of this take hold within the American population, and not just in the American population, in the intelligence services itself, to get to the point where it's weaponized to maybe take down a president of the United States. I want to know that. I want to know that, if I'm being honest, for even selfish reasons. If Sanders gets in office and Sanders says, look, I want to have a different relationship with Russia, what attacks are going to be made on him? There's problematic where the FBI director or the deputy director of the FBI, associate director of the FBI, is sitting in a meeting talking about wearing a wire to take down the president of the United States using constitutional means, meaning this kind of getting him on something where they can impeach him and get him out of office. There's a lot of stuff that's associated with this case that's problematic. It should be looked into. And if I'm not mistaken, it is being looked into. The question is, how fast does Barr get on this? I agree with Woodward. I absolutely and entirely agree with Woodward. And so I'll end this here. I don't want this one to be long. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.